Hello everyone, today our group will presenting about group audit. But before that, let me introduce our group members: Claudia, Zhang, Hafizani, Ruby, and Ami. Group audit referring to if a company has subsidiary companies, holding company is required to prepare group account in the form of consolidated accounts. Auditor for the holding company, principal or primary auditor, is required to express an opinion as to whether the company accounts and the group account show a true and fair view to the members of holding company. In auditing group accounts, auditor is required to possess an appropriate related knowledge about accounting, consolidation, regulations, and standards, disclosure. Requirement of relevant accounting standards. First is on Company Act 2016 under Section 266, Power and Duties of an Auditor. Section 266 Clause 2, where auditor is responsible to perform the audit and give opinion on the consolidation account. Meanwhile, Section 266 Clause 4 and Section 266 Clause 5 is about rights of principal auditor. Besides of Company Act 1965, another requirement is Financial Reporting Standard 127 and 128, which are consolidated and separate financial statement and investment in associates. Before I explaining more detail about the principal auditor, let me explain what is principal auditor, components and other auditor. Firstly, principal auditor is an auditor with responsibility for reporting on the financial statements of an entity, where those financial statements include financial information of one or more component audited by another auditor. Components means a division, branch, subsidiary, joint venture, associated company or other entity whose financial information included in financial statements audited by the principal auditor. Other auditor is an auditor, other than principal auditor, with responsibility for reporting on the financial information of a component which included in financial statement audited by principal auditor. Other auditor include affiliated firm and unrelated auditors. The first specific issues in group audit is principal auditor. If the same auditor for the holding company and subsidiary being appointed, the auditor need not to have separate engagement letter, but must get the confirmation from board of director of each company. There are matters that need to be considered. The first one is materiality of the portion of the financial statements which the principal auditor audit. Then, the principal auditor knowledge of the business of a component. Next, risk of material misstatement in the financial statement of the component audited by other auditors. The extent of the additional audit procedures by principal auditor. And lastly, competence of other auditors also need to be considered. Now, let us proceed with the procedures of principal auditors. The scope of work of a principal auditor is depending on scope of work, any problem encountered in the past, any significant changes, materiality of component compared to group as a whole, and inherent risk assessment of subsidiaries by the principal auditors. Next, principal auditors should perform procedures to obtain sufficient evidence as a basis for opinion. Procedures of principal auditors consists of preliminary stage, detailed audit work, questionnaires, and review of other auditors' working paper. In the preliminary stage, principal auditor need to obtain and prepare schedule of investment in subsidiary showing opening balance of investment in subsidiary, additional or disposal of investment, ending balance, check accounting treatment for gain or loss on disposal, confirmation on the existence and ownership of investment, and obtained audited account or management financial statement of each component. Then, principal auditors need to collect detailed audit work to check the consolidation figure. These includes goodwill or reserve arising on consolidation, pre- and post-acquisition reserve, overall reconciliation and movement, calculation of minority interest, agreement of intercompany balances, adjustment and cancellation of intercompany transaction and balances, proper use of foreign currency rate for translation, and to ensure proper disclosure is done in the audit work. The next step is to give questionnaires to other auditor which include confirmation regarding the internal control of subsidiaries, basis of accounting policies, balance sheet items, profit and loss items, exceptional transactions involve director and general matter, any limitation of scope facing by other auditor, and any qualifications and the reasons for them. Last step in procedures of principal auditor is to review other auditors' working paper if necessary. This is to ensure 1. System examination and documentation of auditor is appropriate. 2. Test of control and substantive test have been properly carried out. 3. Working paper is comprehensive. 4. Review process of working paper has properly been done. 5. The financial statement follow accounting standard. 6. Auditing carried accordance to approved auditing standards. 7. Adequate evidence obtained as a basis to form an opinion. And 8. Identify the intergroup transaction. For every finding, the principal auditor should properly document it. Financial statement of the components, significance of the finding, names of the other auditors, audit procedures performed and conclusions reached of each findings. The possible difficulties of principal auditor may face in respect of audit of foreign subsidiaries are language, culture, accounting and auditing principles and legislations. Responsibilities of the principal auditor is to report names of subsidiaries, of which he not acted as auditor, true and fair view of the group's financial performance, whether he is satisfied with the contents of subsidiaries account for proper preparation of the consolidated accounts, whether he has received satisfactory information and explanations as required, whether auditor's report on the accounts of any subsidiaries was made subject to any qualifications. There are 2 types of report that the principal auditor must consider: unqualified report and qualified report. For unqualified report, principal auditor concludes that the work of the other auditor cannot be used, and principal auditor has not able to perform sufficient additional procedures. If it is immaterial, the principal auditor may express it as unqualified opinion. For qualified report, if not so material and not pervasive, the principal auditor may express it as qualified report under, except for report type. If it is materially significant, the principal auditor may express disclaimer or limitation of scope report or adverse report. Now, we move to using the work of others. The principal auditor have consideration to use the work of another auditor, ISA 600, internal auditor, ISA 610, an expert, ISA 620. ISA 600 using the work of another auditor. When the principal auditor uses the work of another auditor, the principal auditor should determine how work of the other auditor will affect the audit. Lead the planning, especially the timing of the group audit, the specific risk area and audit procedures, intercompany balances and etc. need to satisfy that all material areas of the financial statements of the subsidiaries have been audited satisfactorily. Corporate with the other auditor. For example, to advise principal auditor for any significant event that may have an important impact on the audit consolidated financial statements. In evaluating the work of other auditor, the principal auditors would advise the other auditor about independence issue, audit procedure, the accounting, auditing and reporting requirement areas of special consideration and procedures for identification of intercompany transactions for disclosure. Once reliability of the work carried out by the other auditor is in question, the principal auditor should perform a detailed review of the other auditor's working paper and give attention on existence of proper documentation of audit work, adequacy of the audit program, scope of work covered, whether appropriate test of control and substantive procedures have been performed, whether adequate audit evidence are obtained. If the principal auditor is not satisfied with the working paper, the principal auditor might request the other auditor to perform the supplementary tests, or alternatively, the principal auditor might need to perform the test. ISA 610 using the work of internal auditor in performing audit procedures for the purposes of expressing opinion. An external auditor may review the work of an internal auditor. Internal auditor would be able to advise the external auditor on important issues to ensure that the work of internal auditor is able to complement the work to be performed by the external auditor. External auditor, in order to accept the work of internal auditor, should evaluate the internal auditor in terms of technical competence, professional due care, scope of work, the documentation on planning of internal auditor, sample size selected by internal auditor. International Standard Auditing 620 using the work of an expert deals with the auditor's responsibilities relating to the work of an individual or organization in a field of expertise other than accounting or auditing. When that work is used to assist the auditor in obtaining sufficient appropriate audit evidence, the auditor shall evaluate whether the auditor's expert has the necessary competence, capabilities, and objectivity for the auditor's purposes. In the case of an auditor's external expert, the evaluation of objectivity shall include inquiry regarding interests and relationships that may create a threat to that expert's objectivity. When determining the need to use the work of an expert, the auditor would consider, first, the materiality of the FS item being considered. Second, the risk of misstatement based on the nature and complexity of the matter being considered. Lastly, the quantity and quality of other audit evidence available. Procedures to be performed. First, to ensure that the expert is professionally competent to take up the engagement. Second, to assess the objectivity of the expert. The objectivity of the expert will impaired when the expert is employed by entity. Third, the significance of that expert's work in the context of the audit. Fourth, the auditor's knowledge of and experience with previous work performed by that expert. Last but not least, the auditor should assess the appropriateness of expert's work as audit evidence regarding the financial statement assertion being considered. If an expert does not provide sufficient audit evidence, the auditor still have to resolve the matter. To resolve, the auditor may discuss again with management and the expert, then applying additional procedure including engaging another expert, if required. If still unresolved, the auditor may modify the audit report, unqualified opinion with emphasis of matter, and auditor may issue a qualified report which is due to lack of audit evidence or disagreement.